Welcome to the sound that haunted men. Long after the battlefield went silent, the MG42, nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw, tearing through the dawn mist like a mechanical scream. Every shot, a steel whisper of death. Every burst, a heartbeat skipped. Soldiers froze where they stood, listening, not to commands, not to the wind, but to the sound of fear itself. The barrels spun, hot metal burning through the morning chill, rounds slamming into hedgerows, into timber, into the earth. Each report, relentless, unyielding, a terror measured in thousands of rounds per minute. Men whispered names, prayers, promises to see their children again. But the MG42, it had no mercy. It did not pause. It did not hesitate. It only fed on discipline, on precision, on dread. And somewhere, behind the smoke, behind the cries, Allied soldiers learned a truth no training could prepare them for. Fear had a sound, and it sounded like this. Before we move deeper into the fields, leave a comment where you're listening from, the time on your watch, the air around you. Share the moment when history felt almost present, when the echoes of steel met your imagination. June 6, 1844. The fields of Normandy lay shrouded in a gray, restless dawn. Mist rolled across the hedgerows, curling over shattered timber and barbed wire. Dew soaked the earth, turning every step into a struggle. The air, thick with anticipation, thick with the scent of wet soil and cordite. Engines coughed in the distance, landing craft grinding against the beaches. Waves lapped at sand churned by artillery. And above it all, the metallic scent of war lingered. Soldiers crouched, rifles raised, eyes scanning the horizon, hearts sinking to a rhythm not of their own making. The 1st Infantry Division of the United States Army, bracing against the fortified German defenses, entrenched in a landscape they had never seen, yet one they would soon come to know intimately. The hedgerows, each a fortress of earth and foliage, offered concealment and a deadly maze for those who dared enter. The Germans had turned each rise, each gully, into a killing ground. Machine gun nests hidden beneath twisted branches, snipers perched like ghosts in shattered farmhouses, mortar pits camouflaged with sod, every detail meticulously prepared. Each soldier on the American side carried not only a rifle, but a mind weighed down with manuals, with briefings, with the knowledge of thousands of prior casualties. Yet nothing, no classroom, no diagram, no training, could prepare them for what they would hear. The MG42, waiting, humming in the fog, ready to awaken fear with its mechanical scream. The morning sun barely pierced the mist, a pale, uncertain light over rolling fields. Soldiers pressed forward, boots sinking into mud, weapons clutched, eyes darting. Every snapped twig, every distant echo could herald death. They had crossed the English Channel with resolve, with courage, yet the landscape itself seemed to conspire against them. A rusted fence post became a shield, a ditch a sanctuary, a tree a silent witness, and somewhere, in the undergrowth, the MG42 waited, its crew invisible, its barrels rotating. A death machine perfected over years, calibrated to instill terror. The German defenders, seasoned, drilled, their eyes cold, their hands steady, every sector of fire mapped with precision. The MG42 had a cyclic rate of 1/200 rounds per minute, a number that men could scarcely comprehend. The sound of its first burst would not just pierce the body, but the mind. Every round, a punctuation in the sentence of war. Each hedgerow, a corridor of echoing fear. Reports from the field noted that soldiers sometimes froze, not from confusion, but from the sheer auditory assault. The sound, the cadence, the inevitability. It was as if the earth itself shuddered, bowing to the roar of steel, yet the landscape told stories beyond metal and mud. The bocage carried whispers of farmers, of families, abandoned by history in the middle of slaughter. Crumbling stone walls, remnants of homesteads, bore silent witness to the tide of war. Children's toys, rusted and twisted, lay half-buried among discarded shells. The soldiers, young men, many no older than boys, moved through this ghostly countryside, their footsteps tentative, each breath measured, each heartbeat loud. The MG42 was not just a weapon, it was a specter, a voice of inevitability, echoing through hedgerows, over broken farmyards, into the consciousness of those who survived its initial song. Communication became a dance of gestures, of shouted words lost to the metallic howl. Field telephones rattled, radios crackled, orders were repeated, misheard. The terrain amplified the fear. Each hill, each fold in the earth, became a conduit for terror. Soldiers reported feeling the weapon's presence before they even saw it. A phenomenon later termed acoustic fear, the sound alone dictating movements, dictating hesitation, dictating survival. Artillery had their rumble, mortars their thump, but the MG42, it had a rhythm all its own, sharp, punctuated, unstoppable, like a mechanical heartbeat, beating across Normandy, against flesh and earth, against will and courage. Yet not all was hopeless. Allied engineers, sappers, medics, moved with a purpose, clearing paths, tending to the wounded, constructing field fortifications. Each unit, aware that the sound of the MG42 could appear anywhere, at any moment. They learned to anticipate, to coordinate, to advance in measured bounds. Shadows became allies, smoke and dust their cover. They adapted quickly. Improvisation became a lifeline. The battlefield, chaotic, alive, demanding constant calculation. Each decision, a negotiation with death. The MG42 dictated the terms, yet ingenuity, courage, and sheer numbers slowly carved a way forward. Reports from June 6th through June 12th detail the human cost. 17 soldiers lost in a single hedgerow engagement. Units pinned for hours by overlapping sectors of fire. Yet the same reports highlight resilience. Small teams advancing despite suppressing fire. Casualty evacuation under constant threat. The battlefield, a paradox of terror and triumph. The MG42 was both antagonist and teacher, a harsh tutor, instructing men in the language of fear, in the rhythm of survival. Even as the Allies pressed inland, the fields and hedgerows continued to tell their stories. Each stone wall, each shattered farmhouse, a marker of engagement, of resistance, of adaptation. Soldiers began to memorize the patterns, anticipate the positions, coordinate fire. The sound of the MG42 became a signal, a cue for movement, for counteraction, for survival. A grim choreography dictated by sound and shadow. The mist never fully lifted, and neither did the tension. Every dawn brought the potential of renewed horror. The hedgerows, serene to an outsider, were transformed into cathedrals of fear, where courage was tested, where sound became legend. The MG42 was more than a machine gun. It was an orchestra of dread, conducting men across mud, blood, and shattered timber. And yet, amid the fear, soldiers found rhythm, a fragile cadence of step, of breath, of will. It was not victory, not yet, but it was life. Survival measured in inches, in seconds, in the pause between bursts. By the end of the first week, Allied soldiers had learned the acoustic signature of fear. They spoke of it in whispers, a name for the terror, the buzzsaw. The MG42 had a voice, a presence, and it demanded attention. A soldier who heard it once would never forget. And the landscape, forever etched in memory, each hedgerow, each farm, a monument, a testament to the lessons learned in the gray mist of Normandy, in the roar of spinning barrels, where fear had finally found a sound. The MG42, a weapon forged in the crucible of necessity, designed in 1942 by German engineers, it could fire 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute, a rate of fire so relentless, so precise, that Allied soldiers quickly learned the term Hitler's buzzsaw. In the manuals, the designers boasted of its weight 11.6 kilograms, a relatively light package for the devastation it delivered. Its barrel could overheat within a minute of continuous fire, requiring trained crews to swap in seconds. Each component meticulously crafted, each mechanism honed for efficiency. The MG42 was not just a gun, it was a philosophy of war, distilled into metal spring and trigger. Reports from the Wehrmacht detailed coordinated fields of fire, overlapping sectors, interlocking arcs that left no space untouched. In a single hedgerow, 2 MG42 crews could lay down 400 rounds per minute, cutting down men before they even saw the enemy. American after-action reports from June 6, 1944, recorded casualties of 17 men in one hedgerow, mere minutes, under sustained fire. Communications were nearly impossible. Shouted orders lost to the mechanical scream. Radios crackled, telephones rattled, but sound carried faster than hope. The German crews, often 3 men per weapon, trained to fire in bursts, to alternate barrels, to anticipate the advance of infantry. They were drilled to recognize every shape, every movement, every pause. The MG42 was more than a gun. It was a tutor, instructing both the shooter and the target, teaching lessons in life and death. The manuals emphasized mobility bipods, tripods, rapid deployment, concealment, camouflage. Every nuance mattered, every advantage exploited, every weakness observed, every moment calculated. Allied engineers noted the effect immediately. The MG42 could deliver a killing field of 50 meters width at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Machine gun nests reinforced with sandbags, timber, and debris made suppression difficult. Mortars and artillery often provided only temporary relief. One field report documented that a single 81mm mortar round, although explosive, failed to neutralize a well-positioned MG42 nest. The weapon's efficiency was terrifying. Mechanical precision met human discipline, a perfect storm. In Journals from the Front, Private Edward Larson wrote, "It wasn't just bullets. It was a sound, a rhythm, a pulse that struck before you saw the flash. You froze, and the earth itself seemed to shiver. We knew then that fear could be measured, could be heard. Captain Heinrich Müller, commanding a MG42 team, later recounted in post-war interviews, "We aimed not only at men, but at morale. The sound. It breaks them, faster than the steel." The psychological impact was as intended as the physical. Every burst a message, every drum of rounds a warning. Equipment reports documented the longevity of the MG42 in sustained combat. Barrels were changed every 60 seconds. Crews trained to swap in under 20. Each gun mounted on a tripod or bipod. Each sighted and zeroed for maximum effectiveness. Ammunition belts measured in meters. 50-round boxes feeding seamlessly. The chain of destruction unbroken. German logistics ensured continuous supply. Every crew had 2 belts ready to unleash terror without pause. Soldiers recorded the acrid smell of heated metal, the spitting of brass casings, the clatter of belts on muddy ground, sensory cues that became signatures of impending death. Even the Allies' own intelligence recognized the magnitude of the weapon. Reports from the Office of Naval Intelligence in June 1944 noted that the MG42 represents the most efficient infantry support weapon currently deployed by the Wehrmacht, with a rate of fire exceeding all Allied small arms, capable of delivering suppressive fire across hedgerow field and narrow approach. Morale will be impacted by both kinetic and auditory effects. Field guides were issued. Diagrams circulated, yet nothing could replicate the experience, the roar, the pulse, the inevitability. Further accounts detailed engagements along the Normandy hedgerows, where small squads advancing on German positions were pinned for hours. Each squad of 10 to 12 men faced overlapping fields from 3 to 4 MG42 positions. With 200 rounds per minute per gun, it became impossible to advance in any conventional manner. Casualties mounted, and soldiers adapted, moving in bounds, using smoke, timing their movements between bursts, listening, timing, breathing, calculating survival in seconds. The MG42 also left a lasting imprint in war literature. Memoirs from both sides describe it as a voice, a herald, an entity. It spoke before it fired. Its rhythm marked life and death, wrote Lieutenant Robert Kelly. Its reputation spread. Soldiers on both sides recounted the tales. The buzzsaw became legend. And yet all of it was rooted in fact. Its barrels spun at a documented 200 rounds per minute. Its mechanisms engineered for reliability. Each engagement recorded in after-action reports, in diaries, in the margins of letters sent home. Even the physical evidence remains: spent casings, the worn barrels, the mortared-out emplacements, all attest to the weapon's effectiveness. Its design influenced later generations of firearms. Its legacy, both feared and respected. While human stories of courage and survival filled the pages of history, the MG42 remained the constant, a metronome of death, a voice of mechanical inevitability. Each report, each testimony, each photograph reinforced the reality that the sound of the MG42 was fear incarnate, measurable, unavoidable, and unforgettable. Through these accounts, we see the duality, the mechanical and the human. The gun fired, precise, relentless, calculated. The soldiers felt, feared, adapted. The sound became a teacher, a warning, a guide to movement, to cover, to life. And in every diary, every after-action report, the evidence remains. The MG42 was not merely a weapon, it was an experience, a fact. a reality that altered the landscape and the minds of those who confronted it. The documented rate of fire, the deployment patterns, the casualty reports, the soldier journals, all converge, demonstrating that fear has a sound, and it screamed through the hedgerows, through Normandy, into history. Private Jenkins pressed his back against the shattered stone wall. Mud caked to his uniform, the chill of the Normandy morning biting through his wool coat. He could hear it before he saw it. The telltale rasp of metal. The MG42 awakening from its camouflage. A mechanical heartbeat that shook the ground beneath him. His fingers tightened on the M1 Garand, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed to stay low, yet the orders were clear. Advance, move, survive. Sergeant Collins crawled beside him, whispering over the din. Move on my mark. Wait for the rhythm. The words were swallowed almost immediately by the staccato roar of the buzzsaw. Rounds ricocheted off timber, sprayed across the sodden earth. Mud splashed as men fell into ditches, boots slipping, rifles clattering. Dust and smoke mingled with the mist, making shapes and shadows indistinct. Each movement fraught with danger. Each second felt stretched, elongated. A lifetime measured in blinks and shallow breaths. Jenkins caught sight of Private Ramirez, crawling forward, dragging a wounded comrade behind a low hedge, the man's uniform torn, blood dark against the olive drab. Jenkins wanted to shout, to offer guidance, but his voice would have betrayed their position. He froze, listening, counting, timing the bursts. He had memorized the cadence, the intervals between the spinning barrels, a grim metronome, dictating life and death. Above them, the MG42 crews moved with precision. 3 men per weapon, barrels glowing red, belts of ammunition feeding smoothly. One German soldier adjusted his aim, a cold calm in his eyes. The world reduced to a narrow field of vision, a slice of earth where control was absolute. Each round aimed not just at flesh, but at morale. Each burst designed to break spirit before it could resist. Jenkins felt it in his chest, the vibration of the bullets through the soil, the sound pounding in his ears, a rhythm he could not escape. Ramirez moaned, dragging his comrade. Mud streaked across his face, sweat mingling with rain. Jenkins glanced at him, caught his eye, and they shared a silent promise. Survive. They must. Each movement was rehearsed in the briefest pauses. A roll to the left, a drop to the right, a breath held, then exhaled. The MG42 spat fire again, a chain of steel tearing through air, splintering the wooden barricades, shattering stone, striking life where it fell. Nearby, Lieutenant Hawkins signaled, small gestures, subtle, hands flicking, eyes locking on positions. He had to maintain cohesion. The squad depended on him. One wrong move, one hesitation, and the weapon would claim more than just ground. It would claim spirit. Jenkins followed the motion, timing his crawl with the brief lull between bursts, counting the seconds, seconds that felt like minutes. Life measured in the pulse of a machine, the mechanical heartbeat of fear. In the distance, a medic knelt, tending to a soldier whose leg was pinned beneath rubble. Each movement was choreographed. Silent commands, gestures, whispers. The MG42 reminded them constantly of the cost of exposure, of being visible. Every splash of mud, every echo of spent brass, every metallic ping against stone, each a reminder, a teacher. The landscape itself seemed alive, responding, recoiling, amplifying the terror. Jenkins rolled, narrowly avoiding a burst that tore the hedge to splinters. He saw the face of a German gunner, young, disciplined, focused, a mirror of fearlessness. And yet, somewhere behind that mask, a hint of awareness that they were all trapped, instruments of war, cogs in a machine, bound by orders, by duty, by necessity. The MG42 dictated their choreography, dictated survival, dictated the rhythm of this deadly dance. Private Allen joined them, whispering about the artillery support, the distant rumble, the promise of suppression fire. Yet every sound seemed distant, muted by the scream of the barrels. Jenkins felt each shell's echo, the vibration of cannon against earth, the simultaneous terror and relief. The MG42 did not wait. It did not hesitate, only demanded attention, focus, courage. Each man learned in these moments the interplay of fear and action, of instinct and discipline. Hours seemed to blur, time measured not in minutes but in bursts, in the rhythm of spinning barrels, in the pause between shots. Sweat stung eyes, mud seeped through gloves. Every step was a negotiation, every glance a calculation. The human body became an instrument, tuned to the cadence of mechanical death. Jenkins realized survival was not movement alone. It was awareness, anticipation, reading sound, predicting motion, becoming part of the battlefield's rhythm. By midday, small gains were made, hedgerows crossed, positions cleared, yet the cost was written across the field. Bodies scattered, uniforms torn, rifles bent, smoke rising in thin tendrils. The MG42 had left its mark, both tangible and psychological. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the sound, the fear, the inevitability. It screams, it teaches, it punishes. Private Larson wrote later, each survivor carried the echo, in ears, in chest, in mind, in nightmares. The human scene, intimate, chaotic, raw. Each individual acted, reacted, adapted, against a backdrop of mechanical precision. The weapon remained constant, impartial, relentless. Yet human courage and ingenuity found pathways through its terror. Medics, engineers, sergeants, and privates, each thread woven into the larger tapestry of the day. Each act, small or large, a testament to resilience, a lesson in adaptation, a dance with death. As the sun began to dip, shadows lengthened, smoke and mist blended. Soldiers paused, observing, breathing. The MG42 momentarily silent, yet its presence lingered, an unspoken command, a reminder of lessons learned, of survival dictated by attention, timing, and courage. Private Jenkins exhaled. Mud streaked across his face, heart pounding, aware that every motion, every choice, every breath had been a negotiation with fate. And in these intimate moments, the human cost, the human story, became inseparable from the machine. The mechanical scream, the voice of fear itself. Germany had 12 MG42 positions in that small stretch of hedgerows. Americans faced 3,000 men entrenched. The math was cruel, the odds daunting, yet not insurmountable. Outgunned, yes. Outranged, certainly. outproduced perhaps. But the Allies had numbers, artillery, tanks, ingenuity. 49-234. Sherman tanks against 1-347 Tigers. The MG42 could fire 1-200 rounds per minute. Yet 4,000 American rifles would eventually find a way. The battlefield became a theater of contrasts. Metal versus flesh. Calculation versus instinct. Terror versus resolve. The Germans had perfected fields of fire, overlapping sectors, each gun covering the other. If one position was suppressed, another would open, creating a lethal symphony. Each soldier felt the weight, the inevitability. The hedgerows were alive, snapping, spitting, screaming. With every MG42 burst, men froze, hesitated, calculated, and adapted. The sound dictated movement, dictated pause, dictated survival. It was a cruel tutor, teaching geometry, timing, fear, and endurance. American officers reported that squads pinned for hours could not advance more than 50 meters under sustained MG42 fire. One after-action report noted that 17 men were casualties in a single hedgerow, a few minutes of exposure. The weapon's efficiency was measured in human seconds, the cadence of the barrels, the rhythm of dread. It was relentless, precise, almost cruelly predictable. And yet, it could be countered, outmaneuvered, outsmarted. Field diaries recorded attempts at suppression, mortars, artillery, smoke screens. Each tactic offered temporary relief, a brief pause, enough to advance a few meters, or drag the wounded to safety. The MG42 dictated engagement, dictated tactics, dictated innovation. Soldiers began to anticipate, to memorize bursts, to time their movements, a deadly dance. Each step choreographed by sound, by instinct, by necessity. Outnumbered, outgunned, yet not defeated. The Allies pressed forward, small squads crawling through mud, coordinating with tanks, mortars, air support. Each push a testament to human adaptation. Engineers cleared paths, medics moved under fire. Each act measured, deliberate, courageous. The MG42 remained a constant, a voice of inevitability, a mechanical heartbeat dictating rhythm, teaching fear, enforcing caution, inspiring ingenuity. Casualty reports and unit logs confirm the tension. Dozens injured, some killed, entire squads immobilized. Yet the same documents reveal incremental victories. Positions cleared, terrain secured. The contrast was stark. Death and survival, terror and triumph. The MG42 dictated terms, yet human will carved exceptions. Soldiers learned quickly to move in bounds, to coordinate suppressive fire, to respect the rhythm, to survive. The human mind processed the auditory assault differently than the visual. Soldiers noted the buzzing in ears, the vibration through the chest, a warning signal, an anticipatory fear. Training manuals did not cover this. Experience was the only teacher. The MG42 became both antagonist and mentor, shaping tactics, shaping courage, shaping decisions. In letters home, soldiers wrote of the sound, the terror, the lesson learned, that fear had a voice, and it screamed. German accounts confirmed its psychological effect. Lieutenant Mueller recalled that infantry feared exposure more than retreat. The sound itself was enough, he wrote. We did not need to see them falter. Our barrels did the work. The MG42 had become a legend, an instrument of intimidation. Its efficiency measured not only in casualties, but in hesitation, in disruption, in the human heartbeat. That skipped, froze, and surged under fire. Comparisons and records show the scale. One MG42 nest against 10 to 12 advancing men. The same sector covered by artillery and tanks hours later. The disparity in mechanical efficiency versus human adaptation. Every engagement became a test, an equation, a negotiation with fear. With each hedge cleared, each nest neutralized, the Allies understood the interplay between firepower positioning and courage. The contrast sharpened, the narrative of survival etched in mud, blood, and brass. Even small victories carried weight. One squad advancing 30 meters under cover of smoke, dragging the wounded behind, inspired nearby units. The psychological battlefield expanded. Fear was tangible, measurable, audible, and yet, coordination, ingenuity, and sheer persistence created openings. The MG42 taught the cost of exposure, the price of miscalculation, but it could be mitigated, circumvented, survived. By the end of the week, cumulative reports illustrated both sides' strengths and weaknesses. Germans had machine efficiency, lethal coordination, and precise fire. Americans had numbers, adaptability, determination, and evolving tactics. The hedgerows had become a crucible, teaching lessons in life and death, in anticipation and adaptation. In every after-action report, the data merged with human experience, each number telling a story, each statistic shadowed by courage. The contrast layer, essential to understanding the MG42's impact. Outgunned but advancing, outproduced but resilient, outranged but tactical. The human element never fully neutralized the machine, but it balanced the field. Each engagement a microcosm, a study in the relationship between fear and action, sound and movement, fire and response. The MG42 was both constant and variable. A teacher, an executioner, a voice, a rhythm, a fear made audible. And yet, amid statistics, reports, and analysis, the soldier's lived experience remained central. The mud in gloves, the heat of barrel, the smell of cordite, the cry of wounded comrades, the mechanical roar intertwined with human heartbeat, the factual numbers. 200 rounds per minute, 17 casualties, 12 MG42 positions were inseparable from the human drama. The weapon defined the battlefield, yet human courage defined survival. The interplay, the contrast, became the story itself. By the time the hedgerows were secured, soldiers understood a new reality. That sound, the staccato scream of the MG42, dictated life and death, yet it could be read timed and sometimes overcome. Outgunned, outproduced, overwhelmed, yes, but not defeated. And in these facts, the truth of fear, of courage, and of war was etched, permanent, undeniable, audible. By late afternoon, the hedgerows that had once seemed insurmountable now bore the marks of relentless human will. The MG42, its barrels red hot, had sung its mechanical hymn of death. Yet the tide had shifted. American infantry, battered but alive, pressed forward, inch by inch, taking ground, reclaiming earth that had seemed untouchable. Each step measured, each breath precious. Every man aware that survival was both a gift and a lesson, learned in real time. Corporal Davis later recalled, "We realized fear has a voice, and it spoke in metal and smoke, in the rhythm of those barrels. We had to listen, to understand, to survive." The psychological impact of the weapon, profound, lasting. Each squad that moved through the fog of gunfire carried not only wounded bodies, but the echo of dread. The MG42 had forced a reckoning with mortality, with courage, with the raw mathematics of life and death. German crews, exhausted, reloaded belts, swapped barrels, scanned the advancing lines. Theirs was a discipline perfected over years. Yet even they sensed the shift. The Allied numbers, coordination with armor and artillery, made the difference. Lieutenant Mueller admitted later, "We were facing more than men. We were facing an industrial nation, a tide of metal and will. The MG42 could not hold alone. It was a warning and a testament, but it was not invincible." The confession echoed through reports, diaries, post-war interviews, the machine formidable, yet mortal. Field reports documented the consequences. Entire sections of hedgerow cleared, casualties evacuated, prisoners taken, German defensive positions neutralized. Yet the cost was staggering. Exhaustion, injury, shock. Soldiers described an auditory trauma, ringing in ears, a rhythm seared into memory. They spoke of it in letters home, in whispers. The buzzsaw was not just a weapon. It was a teacher, a reminder that the sounds of fear could last long after the echoes faded from the battlefield. Medics worked under constant threat, dragging wounded to temporary safety. Their courage often overshadowed by the mechanical roar, yet their actions, life-saving and deliberate, were part of the broader equation. Each bandaged arm, each splinted leg, each whispered reassurance, a counterpoint to the deafening tempo of the MG42. Survival was as much about human solidarity as it was about tactical mastery. Even the landscape bore witness. Splintered timber, churned mud, scorched earth. The hedgerows, once a maze of fear, became a map of human endurance. American engineers and sappers reinforced positions, patched craters, constructed field fortifications. The mechanical roar had demanded adaptation, and the human response, though costly, prevailed. Each measured advance, each cautious crawl, each coordinated burst of rifle fire transformed the battlefield and the narrative of engagement. After-action reports recorded that small units once pinned could now maneuver. The MG42 still fired, still deadly, yet its impact had been mitigated. Tactics evolved, soldiers learned, instincts sharpened, fire and movement, suppression and advance became a rhythm, a dance, dictated in part by fear, yet ultimately mastered through adaptation. The battlefield, once a cacophony of terror, had been shaped into a canvas of strategy, skill, and survival. The psychological toll, however, was undeniable. Veterans would later speak of hearing the buzzsaw in dreams, in quiet moments, the mechanical scream that defined their first engagements lingered in the mind, in the chest, in memory. It was a sound that demanded respect, that taught vigilance, that shaped courage, and even in victory, left a residue, a shadow, that no medal or report could erase. Casualty statistics confirmed the high human cost, yet they also highlighted adaptation and resilience. Entire squads had learned to move in coordination with armor, to anticipate bursts, to time advances. The MG42 dictated tempo, but ingenuity carved openings. Soldiers' letters, diaries, and post-war interviews converge, documenting both terror and triumph. Fact and human experience intertwined, the mechanical and the human, inseparable. The legacy of the MG42, measured in lives, in fear, in strategy, and in survival. By nightfall, the field was quieter, though not silent. Fires smoldered, smoke curling into the Normandy sky. Soldiers huddled, some praying, some writing notes, some simply breathing, aware that the day had been survived, yet knowing the lessons would carry forward. The MG42 had defined the engagement, yet it had not defined the outcome. Human courage, adaptability, numbers, and the capacity to endure had prevailed. Commanders reviewed logs, tallying men, equipment, positions gained. They noted patterns, successes, failures. The MG42's legacy in these reports was clear: lethal efficiency, psychological domination, but ultimately countered by combining numbers, coordination, artillery support, and human will. The tide of battle shifted. Lessons were codified for future engagements, strategies adapted, tactics refined. Survival was a calculus, dictated in part by fear, yet mitigated by understanding. Soldiers' personal reflections, journals and letters, reveal the enduring impression. The buzzsaw, wrote Private Larson, was more than metal. It was sound, and sound became fear. It followed us home, haunted us, but it also taught us to listen, to anticipate, to survive. The duality of terror and education, mechanical power and human ingenuity, defined this chapter of Normandy. The battlefield had spoken, and those who survived had learned its language. And so, the MG42 spinning barrels glowing in the fading light had left its mark, not only on flesh and soil, but on memory, on strategy, on human understanding of war. The roar faded, but its lessons endured. Fear had a sound, and men had learned to respond. The battlefield, transformed. The echo of the machine, a permanent teacher. Its legacy, indelible, undeniable, eternal. Some lessons were written in smoke and steel, others in silence. The fields of Normandy lay quiet now, hedgerows torn, earth churned, but the echoes of spinning barrels, the mechanical heartbeat of the MG42, lingered in memory. Soldiers would long remember the sound, the rhythm, the terror. It was not merely noise, it was pedagogy, a harsh teacher of instinct and courage. Each man who survived carried it with him, in heartbeat, in breath, in the subtle twitch of the eye. The weapon itself, cold metal and spring, had no agenda beyond efficiency, yet it imposed one nonetheless. It dictated motion. It taught caution. It measured hesitation. The roar, relentless, impartial as fate itself. And yet it was a voice, a presence that shaped men, shaped decisions, shaped the course of an engagement. Each burst a punctuation, each salvo a sentence. In the language of war, the buzzsaw, it had spoken, and the soldiers, they had listened, learned, endured. Across the smoldering landscape, shadows lengthened, smoke curling from shattered homesteads. The men who had pressed forward, who had crawled, dragged, fired, adapted, now rested, surveying the ground they had earned. The MG42 had been both adversary and instructor, demonstrating power, instilling fear, and yet revealing vulnerabilities. Even the most disciplined crews had limits, and human will, when coordinated, resilient, determined, could find gaps, exploit rhythm, survive. and prevail. Letters home, journals, diaries, each preserved a fragment, a note of horror, a moment of triumph. Private Larson wrote, "I can still hear it, the barrels spinning, the sound of fear. But I also hear us, moving, surviving, learning, adapting." The battlefield had taught more than tactics. It had taught the mind to anticipate, the senses to interpret, the body to react. The MG42, though machine, had imposed human reflection. Every survivor became part of the ongoing story, a story of courage, of fear, of adaptation. Even the Germans, in post-war interviews, acknowledged its impact. Lieutenant Mueller admitted, "We aimed to control space, to dominate, to instill terror." Yet the Allies adapted. Their will was persistent. The machine was powerful, but human determination proved a counterforce. We could not account for every variable, every act of ingenuity, every heartbeat of survival. The admission, a testament to the duality of war, machine versus human, sound versus instinct, fear versus courage, the remnants of the battlefield, splintered wood, brass casings scattered across mud, twisted metal, still tell the story. Each site, a monument, not to victory alone, but to experience, to endurance, to the lessons that echoed in the minds of soldiers. The MG42's roar faded, yet its influence persisted. In strategy meetings, in after-action reports, in training notes, its legacy shaped doctrine. It informed tactics. It reminded generations that sound could define engagement, and fear could be audible. Night fell, the horizon softened, and yet the memory of the day remained sharp. Soldiers huddled, writing letters, whispering recollections, reflecting on moments when seconds and the spacing of bullets had meant survival. The auditory trauma, the mechanical terror, would follow them home, into barracks, into quiet evenings, into the recesses of sleep, and into history. The buzzsaw was not forgotten, nor the lessons it imparted. In quiet reflection, historians would later note, the MG42 changed more than battlefield outcomes. It changed how men perceived danger, how units coordinated, how tactics evolved. It demanded attention, measured hesitation, imposed rhythm. The machine was brutal, precise, and yet it fostered ingenuity, teamwork, adaptive strategies. Each engagement became an equation, solved in real time, under fire, with lives on the line. The sound of fear became a tool, a metric, a guide. Some questions linger. What if the soldiers had misjudged the timing, misread the cadence, hesitated too long? What if the MG42 had been deployed elsewhere, in other conditions, in different hands? These echoes, hypothetical but potent, remind us that war is not only a matter of firepower, but of perception, anticipation, courage, adaptation. Each decision, each pause, each movement carries consequence. In every hedgerow, in every shattered farmhouse, the lesson persists. And yet, amid reflection, there is continuity. The next story begins where the last echo faded, where ingenuity met inevitability, where courage confronted terror. The fields may rest, but the knowledge endures. Soldiers passed on stories, oral, written, each account a thread, connecting past to present, teaching the next generation that fear has a sound, and that sound can be understood, interpreted, met, survived. Some lessons were etched in fire and steel, others in memory. The MG42 had been a voice, a teacher, a presence that transcended its barrels. Each survivor carried its echo, each recounting renewed it. The roar, mechanical, relentless, yet finite. The human response, adaptive, courageous, enduring. These truths remain permanent, etched in battlefield reports, diaries, letters, and in the collective consciousness, reminding us that the sound of fear is real and survival is a matter of rhythm, awareness, and will. So the Normandy fields rest, silent to the untrained ear. Yet to those who were there, or who study its echoes, the lesson is clear. Fear has a sound, courage has a rhythm, and the dance between them defines history. Some echoes fade, some linger, some teach, others haunt. But all remind us that in war, sound can be weapon, instinct a lifeline, and memory eternal.